Hi, and welcome to Internships 101, Finding and Applying to Internships. My name is Liz Bañuelos Castro. I'm the Internship Programs Advisor here at the Career Center. This recording is primarily for undergraduate students. Over the course of this presentation, I'm going to be going over understanding yourself, doing your research on internships, how to build a list of internships you want to apply for, where to find internships. I will briefly cover resumes and cover letters, as well as interviews and some Career Center resources to help you with your process. Alrighty, so when you get started on your internship search process, you want to do some self-reflection. If you're not sure about which area, which industry, where your strengths are, really sit down and think about like what your interests are, what your skills are, what you like to do, like where your passions are, right? Sometimes students will come in saying that they want an internship so that they can sort of figure that out. But typically when you apply to an internship, they already want to know why you're interested in them specifically. So it's important you do this sort of self-reflection before you even apply. You want to think about what you hope to gain from the internship, right? Is it some skill set? Is it knowledge of the industry? Is it that you're trying to break into it? Do you want to network, right? So what do you hope to kind of get out of it too? Now, here are some exploration tools that we have for you all. Connecting majors to careers is one of my favorite resources for doing this sort of exploration. If you're in your major, you're not really sure what to do with it. Connecting majors to careers can help you sort of figure out the different options you have in different career paths. So you can do so by going into it, clicking on your major, and then from there you can kind of figure out but you can kind of figure out once you click on it, if you look at the screen, as an example, if you click on like business, you know, what type of business you're looking at, clicking on economics, and then it'll show you the different areas of economics that you can go into with an economics major. So for example, banking and finance, insurance, sales, management, education, and then it gives you, you know, some common career paths, some strategies, as well as at the bottom, professional associations you can join, related resources to look more into this career path, and then, you know, some job titles that you can look into as well. Other places you can look being ONET and your next step to do some more like exploration into the actual careers themselves, including salary, how to obtain those jobs after you graduate, the sort of skills and strengths that they look for, to see if like they're a good match with you. I also encourage you to speak with faculty, staff, and peers. I think that faculty, if they sometimes they work in industry themselves, so they can kind of speak to the industry, or they have friends who work in the industry, or they did at some point. You can also talk to staff and possibly your peers. Many of your peers have already had internships, especially those of them in the same major. So they're a really good starting point for even getting your foot in the door with certain industries, but also just to learn about like their experience, what sort of skill sets they needed, how they were able to obtain that internship. So all good ways to do some career exploration. I would also encourage you to use some external resources like Indeed and Glassdoor, as well as firsthand for like the deep dive into what the career entails. Alrighty, so the next step in the internship process is to do your research, meaning you want to make sure you're looking into the recruiting deadlines. They vary by industry. So for example, if you were interested in investment banking, consulting, some more technical ones, they're recruiting a lot earlier than other industries. You want to make sure you're researching the job market. So how does it look like right now? Is there a lot of internships available or not? Should you look into alternatives for experience? And then you want to research the companies themselves. So you can do this by looking on Handshake, on LinkedIn to discover new companies. You also want to look into like researching the culture, the size of the companies to see if they're a good fit. So for example, some students really like to work at startups because they're smaller, they're more hands-on. Others like to work at bigger companies. So it kind of depends on like what you're looking for. Make sure that you understand the internship description. I would encourage you to save it too, if possible, especially if you are applying to that internship. This will help you later on when you're preparing for the interview. And then for reference, this is the internship timeline. This is also available on our website, in the internships portion of our website. As you can see, there are many different recruiting timelines. So just make yourself familiar with this as you kind of look into what you're interested in doing. As I mentioned, like consulting and finance, they tend to start recruiting about 14 to 16 months before the start of the actual internship. Well, if you're interested in more like government, they recruit in the spring for that same summer. So just familiarize yourself with this. You are welcome to take a screenshot or look at our website for more details. Alrighty, so you've done some research, you kind of have an idea of the companies. Next, you want to build your list. So typically, I recommend making a list of about 20 to 30 organizations that you are interested in applying for. And kind of make it a mix. I would encourage you to make it a mix of like big companies, small companies, mid-sized companies, and organizations. And you can use Handshake and LinkedIn, as mentioned before, to help you find the organizations. I would also encourage you to make an actual like spreadsheet to kind of keep yourself organized and accountable. So something that I recommend is having like, a column for the organization, one for when the application opens, one for when it's due, the link for application, and then just notes on like when you've submitted it or not. I also recommend that you follow these organizations on LinkedIn and social media. They often do post when they're going to be opening the internships, especially if you are following a recruiter. They will post that internships will be opening, at X date. And so you want to make sure you are on top of that, especially if they have a very short window. So for example, Disney, they only opened their application for internships for about 48 hours. And so with such a short window, you want to make sure you are first to know of when that application does open. Okay, so where can you find internships at USC? So one, Handshake, we have all of our job postings there. You can also filter by the type of internships, paid or unpaid, the industry. So there are a lot of options there in terms of like, using Handshake. You can also search for them at career fairs, including the upcoming fall career fair on September 11th, the culture and community recruiting event on September 10th. And then I also encourage you to attend the school-specific career fairs. For example, like Viterbi and Marshall and Annenberg will all have their own career fairs as well. You can also find internships through workshops and coffee shops, particularly Trojan Talks that are held by employers. So if you don't know what a Trojan Talk is, you can find them on Handshake for upcoming Trojan Talks. But it is essentially when an employer will come and do either like an information session or they'll do a workshop, a professional development workshop, and their goal in it is really to like either bring more students to their organization, help you learn about getting your foot in the door. They have different goals, but typically at these Trojan Talks, you can learn more about their internship and full-time opportunities. If you are available to join one, especially if it's an organization of interest, I would encourage you to do so. As mentioned before, your peers have a lot of information about internships, like what made them successful, what they liked and didn't like. And with that in mind, Industry Insights and the Industry Insiders series are a good series to attend. So the Industry Insiders are your fellow peers who are interns here with the Career Center who have successfully obtained internships. And they do workshops and group discussions on how to essentially get an internship yourself. And we have representation from different industries. We have this information on our website as well as at the end of this recording. Industry Insights is a panel of employers and alumni speaking about their experiences in certain industries. So for example, we've had panels that are entirely about technology, careers in technology, panels about careers in entertainment. And so I would encourage you to attend these as well because sometimes they do talk about opportunities. It's also just a good way to network. If it is an alum that you feel like could give you more insights into something you're interested in, you could possibly reach out to them too. And then we have the Insight Scoop series, another panel series with employers, except this is from recruiters doing professional development workshops, panels where they are giving their perspective on upcoming career fair advice, interview advice from the perspective of the recruiters themselves. So if you want like an inside look into how recruiters their thought process for the career fairs, the interviewing and networking, I would encourage you to attend this series. There will be more information at the end about this. Alrighty, so external resources to find internships. We have LinkedIn Jobs, a great place to find internships, especially if you are following the organizations on LinkedIn. We also encourage you to use Extern or Parker Dewey. So Extern is for specifically remote internships, but these are full, like 8-week long internships. Essentially, companies will post their opportunities on Extern that are remote opportunities if that is something you're open to. These are great opportunities that you can do from anywhere. Parker Dewey is more like micro internships. So these are paid micro internships, and they're also all remote. And this is a good way to build your resume if you're like a first year or second year and you don't really have much experience and you want to stand out a little bit more. You can like take on these micro internships that vary in time commitment from maybe 2 days to 2 weeks. And you can do as many as you want. So we've once had a student who did like 21 of these micro internships throughout like an academic year. So if you are looking to build your resume, Parker Dewey is a great way to do that. Now, if you're interested in consulting, I would encourage you to use Forage or Management Consulted. Forage is a case that you do that feels like a real life like consulting case. It takes about 6 hours to complete. However, at the end of it, you do get a certificate that you can put on your resume. Students who are interested in consulting but like don't really have much information about it, Forge is a good way to know like if this is right for you. Sometimes students complete it and then they think this is right for me. I love consulting. I love the case that I did. It was so fun. And sometimes students will start it and realize like actually consulting isn't for me. So whatever happens, Forge is just a good starting point to see if like consulting is the right path for you. You don't have to complete the 6-hour case study in one sitting. You can also do it like 1 hour a week if you wanted to. And then it is actually put together by like Accenture, Deloitte, Citi, if you wanted to put that on your resume. And if you're looking for consulting internships, Management Consulted is a great place to look. They have the table of deadlines on there that kind of helps cut back some of the research. And you can also look at like consulting companies, like culture, just more information about them, big and small. They have boutiques on there as well. If you're looking to work at nonprofits, Do Good LA is a good website for finding nonprofits in the Los Angeles area. If you're looking to do some federal internships, Like if you're interested in government, usajobs.gov is a good place to do that. And just generally for other government jobs, governmentjobs.com is a great place for that for like local state government. And if you're an international student, Interstride is a website made by international students for international students. It cuts back some of the work in that the companies or postings there are from companies that have historically offered sponsorship. And so it makes the search a little bit easier. Going global is good for finding internships abroad. So if you really want to intern in another country, going global is a really good place to find that. It also gives you information about like how resumes look in other countries so that you can tailor your resume for like the standard in that country. And then it also gives you like it has like a quiz for like how well you match with the country's culture. So really cool feature. I think like I matched really well with like France as an example. And then F1 Hire, that is a extension on Google. Again, you can find this through Handshake, but essentially it's like a little pop-up that when you're like looking at a job, it shows you if the company offers sponsorship. So again, if you're trying to cut back some of the work and trying to figure out if a company will offer sponsorship for you, these are some great resources, Interstride and F1 Hire. For more like visa specific questions, I would encourage you to talk to OIS though. Alrighty. Now thinking about networking strategies. So networking can help you obtain an internship. You can do this by connecting with starting with people you know. So like your family, your friends, your peers, professors, pretty much anyone. You want to tell everybody and anybody who will listen that you're looking for an internship. Because you never know, like somebody could have a connection, somebody could know someone who's hiring, or somebody can connect you with someone at a company you're looking for. So just tell everybody. I think your peers and your friends are a really good starting point. Professors, visit them at office hours. Oftentimes they either work in industry, they know someone who works in industry, and they can give you more information about getting your foot in the door. And then family, you never know who your family knows, even if they are in a different industry, they could be a big help too. And I've spoken with a lot of students who were able to find internships through family friends. And then if you are comfortable doing so, you can also reach out to alumni through Trojan Network or LinkedIn. And if you're unfamiliar, Trojan Network is like LinkedIn, but specifically for USC students and alumni. It's a really good it's a really good platform for finding alums at like certain companies or with certain majors or experiences. It's a great search function. And you can reach out to ask for like informational interviews or just a quick 15-minute like chat on the phone or on Zoom. People do like to talk about themselves. Just remember that when you are reaching out, you want to make sure you have a goal in mind. And you're planting seeds for long-term growth, right? You're not like asking for an internship right off the bat, but you are like, just getting to know them and getting to know like their career paths organically. Usually internships will come up and the person you're speaking to, the alumni you're speaking to will probably bring it up themselves because they'll recommend like, you should get an internship to see if this is right for you, or you should get an internship to get your foot in the door, right? And that's like a very organic way of then asking for their advice for internships, but not asking for an internship right off the bat. So just like a word of caution there, when you are networking, you want to make sure you are, being authentic, but also like not transactional in your asks. We do have more information on networking next week. And I encourage you to join us for that as well, to learn more about like networking advice, and just more in depth how the Trojan Network works. And then we also have LinkedIn workshops that you can attend on Fridays to have your LinkedIn profile reviewed here at the Career Center. Alrighty, so you have searched for these internships, you found them, you know what you're applying to. You want to have a final draft of your resume and cover letter ready. So for your resume, you want to make sure that it is one page, that it's organized well, that it is tailored to the job description. You want to make sure you get a second pair of eyes on it just to make sure you don't have any like typos, that it's written well. You want to make sure that you have conveyed well to the employer that you have the skill set or the passion for the internship. Some resources for you that I recommend is one, VMock. This is our resource AI tool that reviews resumes. So you can upload your resume and it would review it and give you line by line feedback on your resume. It's pretty on par with what an advisor would say. On VMock, you can also build your resume. So if you don't have one, you're starting from scratch. It has a template that is approved by us and ATS friendly. And then we also have a booklet that gives you example resumes. If you're a visual learner, I think this is a really good place to start too. It also has like 3 pages of action verbs. It has advice on cover letters and how to write cover letters, as well as advice on LinkedIn profiles. And then you can also come to drop-ins. There will be more information at the end about that, but we can also review your resume or cover letter during drop-ins. And then you want to make sure you have a cover letter that is formally written to whoever the hiring manager is. Try and see if you can find their name, or at the very least their title. And lastly, you want to make sure you have references page ready. This isn't something that you like submit to the employer when you apply for an internship. However, with a references page, you basically are reducing some of the time in asking your references for their information, including like their name, their title, their phone number, their email, the company where they work, like the address. These are all things that they may ask about for the references. You also want to make sure that they know that you are putting them as a reference. Because you don't want to be in an awkward situation where they call a reference, they call one of your references, and then they pick up and they're like, I don't remember this person, or I don't know like what you're talking about. So just want to make sure that you ask your references if it is okay that they are your reference. And then this is a link to our resumes, CVs, cover letters, and LinkedIn profiles booklet. So that should take you to the PDF that will you can like look through. We did try to have resumes for different industries too. So we have one in there that's more for like liberal arts. We have one there for more business, one for engineering. So just kind of like look through and see like which one seems like the right fit for you. But again, these are just like visual examples. You can also build it from scratch with the VMock template that is also approved by us. Alrighty, and next you want to make sure you're doing well on the interview. So make sure that you are preparing for the interview, meaning research the company and the industry before the interview. Make sure you know which, internship and company you are applying for. You don't want to be in the awkward situation where you are interviewing for an internship, but the whole time you're thinking about like a different internship you thought you were interviewing for. And you want to make sure you have some questions ready for them at the end. This is where the research comes in handy and where the job description comes in handy that I told you about earlier. So the job description can help you prepare for the interview because you can think of questions that they may ask based on the job description. Or if you wanted to use like ChatGPT to help you, you could also copy and paste the job description into ChatGPT and ask it to give you 5 to 10 interview questions based on that job description. And that's a really good way to prepare for an interview. And that way you can kind of have like examples or stories prepared for the questions. I would encourage you to practice in the mirror too. You don't want to sound too rehearsed, but you do just want to make sure you sound like, confident and sure of yourself, and you have like a good example for the questions that they ask you. Other ways to prepare, we have Big Interview. This is a AI that we also have on Handshake. And essentially on Big Interview, you can also kind of record yourself with like an AI person asking you the questions. It does feel like a real interview and they are tailored to your industry. So on Big Interview, you can tell or you can select like engineering as like the industry and it'll give you more like specific questions to your industry. Or you can make a mock interview appointment. We do ask that you will give us at least 3-day notice. So we have time to prepare the questions that are more tailored to your industry and the job, especially if you have a link to the job description. That is very helpful for us. And then lastly, you do want to write a thank you note. So, a question that I get often is, should you write a thank you note? The answer is yes. You don't know what kind of like hiring manager you're getting. It doesn't hurt, right? You know, sometimes hiring managers feel like it's rude if you don't. Some of them don't care. But because you don't know which one you're getting, it's just safer to send a thank you note. Typically like the next day, to kind of remind them of the interview and, you know, when it's fresh in their memories. I think, you know, is also a good opportunity to revisit a question that maybe you didn't feel so confident about. Your thank you note is somewhere where you can address it again. And quickly revisiting the cover letters, another question that I get often is, do I need to write a cover letter if it is optional? The answer is yes, because you don't know, again, what kind of recruiter or hiring manager you're getting when you submit your application. I've definitely met some that like don't even consider an application if there's no cover letter there. And I've met some who said that they don't read them. So you don't really know which one you're getting, which is best to kind of make the odds more in your favor and submit the cover letter anyway, right? Alrighty. So returning to this, you've submitted the thank you note. And now that you have interviewed, you've aced the interview, and now you have gotten an offer. So before you accept the offer, you want to make sure you have all of these things in your offer. So you want to make sure the name of the company and specific department is listed, as well as your internship title. So this is important because sometimes like they will offer you the internship, but it'll be for a different department that you didn't interview for. And so you want to make sure that you know what you know that it is the right internship department that you interviewed for. You want to make sure the title is correct and you know who your supervisor will be. You want to make sure you know the internship start and stop dates. Again, maybe this conflicts with something on like your schedule or your classes. And so just making sure you are aware of those dates. Again, remember you are signing a contract of employment. So this is like legally binding. You want to make sure you know your work schedule, meaning like dates, times, and just being aware of like if it conflicts with anything on your schedule. Make sure you know if it's paid or unpaid, if it is paid, how much and how often. Again, you want to get that in writing. And that just again becomes very important for like legal reasons in case they don't pay you the right amount, then you have it in writing what they were supposed to pay you. And for some internships, they involve optional like legal disclosures or NDAs. So again, just making sure you know what those are and you know what you're signing before you sign anything. And if you don't have all of this information, you want to make sure that you speak to HR before you sign on to the internship. Okay, so we have gone over a lot of information. You want to make sure you're also getting or like taking care of yourself. So give yourself some grace in this process and remember like there's no linear path to a specific company or internship or job. So for you, it's possible that you'll land it right away. Maybe your friend, it'll take them like a few months. So just don't compare yourself. It'll look different for everybody. Make sure you're managing your time well. Remember, like this is on top of your academic commitments, your extracurricular, your personal life. So just making sure like you do manage your time well with all of balancing all of this. And do what's right for you. So sometimes I get asked like, how many internships should I be applying to per day, per week, per month? And honestly, the answer varies by how much time you have, right? What is what your capacity is for this. So only you can really answer that question. And celebrate the small wins, meaning like if you've applied to something, you should celebrate that. If you were invited to interview, that is also a win. Prioritize any downtime. So if you have any like time to just rest from all this process, I encourage you to do so. Ask for help when you need it. We're here to help you at the Career Center. You also have the school-based career centers, as well as your peers, your professors. Like we're all rooting for you, and so just make sure you ask for help. And utilize like USC counseling and mental health services. If you need it, I did put the website there. And just to plug some of our upcoming events, mentioned earlier, we do have the upcoming Culture and Community Recruiting event happening on September 10th, as well as a career fair on September 11th. You can already view the employers that will be there. I encourage you to attend them, to do some research on them, and to show up and see if you can find an internship there. And as mentioned earlier, we also have the industry insiders, which are your peers who have successfully obtained internships. I encourage you to attend some of those sessions to hear directly from your peers about how they successfully obtained internships. And then we also have the Insight Scoop starting next week. If you want to hear directly from recruiters about what they're looking for in career fairs and interviews and networking, I encourage you to join us for those sessions. And then, as mentioned earlier, we have drop-in advising for resume review, cover letter review, quick questions. These are 15-minute sessions from 1 to 3:30 p.m. You don't need an appointment. You can just show up to that. We are located in STU 110 across from Seeds. If you do have more questions, you can always email us at careers@usc.edu or visit our website for more resources. And then if you'd like to contact me, my name is Liz, that's my email, that's my colleague Lauren. And then our social media accounts, we are actually pretty funny. I would encourage you to follow us on Instagram. And with that said, thank you so much for listening to the recording. Good luck on your search. You got this, and we're always here to help.